I'll let him get on start broadcasting and everything. We're going to talk today about faith of our fathers, and I got to tell you, I thought about yesterday as I was listening to some of the others talk about Gordon and how great he was at speaking life over his kids and over his extended family and everything else. And I was thankful that there's people like that. I'm thankful that I had a good father that spoke into me, that listened to me when we would be driving. A lot of times, I don't know why, but we did a lot of our talking when we would drive, when he would be driving and I'd be in the passenger seat. We'd do a lot of great talking, and those things are important. Those things are important. Kids need to know that you have a faith like you want them to have a faith. And give me a second. I'm thankful for good parents here. I put fathers on here, but it's not actually, it takes two parents to do all those things. And my examples are going to come from men that were fathers in the thing, because it's the Bible a lot of times focused on men. So, but ladies, I understand that you have put a great commitment into those things, but it does. The whole purpose of this message is to talk about being faithful parents. I'm going to talk today about three different men, and these three men, they looked great on the outside, but something went wrong. So we're going to dive into this. We're going to start out with our first person. This is Eli. Eli was a priest. Wish I had a picture of him, but they didn't have pictures back then. So, bear with me. Limitations at the time. Eli was a priest. He came when Hannah was in deep distress. This woman named Hannah came into his congregation and was deeply distressed, and she's praying before the Lord. And Eli, originally in the natural, he thought that there was something wrong with Hannah, that she had come in drunk and was just using the temple of the Lord to play out her drunkenness. But he found out that there was real pain in what she was dealing with. So he prayed with her while she was in that temple. And Hannah had a son. And she agreed that if she would have a son, because she was childless, she would donate that first son to the priesthood. And so Eli later trained this Samuel, Hannah's son. And don't worry about Hannah. She had more children after that. But Samuel was given to the Lord. And so Eli trained Samuel. And he was considered, all in all, a good priest and judge of Israel. But there was something wrong. We pick up here in 1 Samuel 2:22. I just now realized I forgot to change all those soaps verses, but anyways, bear with me. It's been a couple weeks, so we're good. It says, now Eli was very old, and he heard everything his son did to all of Israel, and how they lay with the women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So he said to them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all the people. No, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people transgress. And if one man sins against another, God will judge him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who will intercede for him? Nevertheless, they did not heed the voice of their father, because the Lord desired to kill them. Now get a couple things straight here. These sons, they were past the age of accountability. They'd been given chance after chance to change their ways. They knew what they should be doing, but they chose to do something different. And Eli, as an old man, is speaking to his sons, trying to get them to change their ways. But something tells me there was a disconnect for Eli from his sons. That he had spent a lot of time standing before the Lord and in his position and in what he was doing. And maybe he didn't spend enough time with the children. One of the most touching things that I heard yesterday was Steve. He got up on the microphone and he talked about how Gordon was worried that maybe he missed some things as a father. Maybe he wasn't there enough for the kids. And, Steve said he reassured his dad that Dad, you were there for all the important things. I remember those times you took us hunting, that you shared your faith and everything else. And it just did me so much good. But there was a disconnect from Eli and his sons. Eli was a great man. He was a great man. But he didn't train his sons up in that way. Now I want to read you this prophecy that came to Samuel, and Samuel was about 10 years old. And it says, "Then the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I will do something in Israel which both ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. In that day I will perform against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons have made themselves vile, and he did not restrain them. And therefore I have sworn to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by the sacrifice or offering forever." Why is this important? Because Eli's priesthood would end. It would end. His sons ran off with the Ark of the Covenant and took it out to the Philistines, and because they wanted to be the big heroes. And in that battle they were killed. And when Eli heard this, he also died. And seeing all this, Samuel knew that. Samuel knew all this happened. And so we bring the second person before you, Samuel. Samuel judged Israel. He was over all of Israel, considered one of the great judges, the last of the judges. He was a prophet, and he chose both of Israel's first two kings. A great guy. And you heard that prophecy that he gave to Eli, didn't you? You heard that God expects, even if you're a great person and you do great things, God expects you to raise your children well. But listen to what this says. It says, "Now it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of the second Abijah. And they were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain. They took bribes, and they perverted justice." Almost exactly what happened with Eli. If Samuel knew what happened to Eli, did he not think it would happen to him? He didn't take the warning that was before him. God takes raising your children so seriously. It's the most important job that you can have. And I know it gets hard. I know it's I was just reading Mom today. I've got a good friend and his wife. She posts their daily troubles. They got 2 kids, remind me of me and my brother, because they just can't help but butt heads. But he calls us to be faithful in those things. The next person is David. And David and Samuel had a special relationship. I know he'd heard all this stuff that had went on with both Eli and Samuel, because David loved the Lord. And you're only a couple generations removed from this both of these stories. And you've got David, and he's a man after God's own heart. He ministered to the Lord. He was a giant killer. He was considered a good king. And even though his son was renowned, Solomon had problems. Solomon was supposedly the smartest man that's ever been on the face of the earth. And yet he still had problems. Look at what this said, because David also had wives, and Solomon then took more wives because he was considered a great king. And Solomon picked up on that lesson, but not the lesson to continue to go after God with your whole heart. It says, "But King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, the Sidonians, and Hittites. And from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your heart from their God. Surely they will turn your heart away to their God. And Solomon clung to these in love. David was a great man. Solomon was a great man. But there was a disconnect. What I'm saying today is it doesn't matter your station in life. It doesn't. We're all called to help those that are younger than us with everything that we have. But that's the most important thing that there is in life. Because of that failure in the lives of Eli, Samuel, and David, their kids had problems. They didn't train them up right. All Solomon saw was that David had wives up there. And from all accounts, it seemed like David had wives that, were just kind of there. They weren't actually, they were more wives of, like, to make an arrangement with another nation. He basically never was with them. But Solomon just saw that David had a lot of wives. He didn't take in those lessons that David knew, that had been taught to him his whole life, that he himself had tried to put into action and understood. He didn't learn from David's problem with his own mother, with Solomon's own mother, that God takes what he does seriously. And these three men all held sacred roles in Israel, the top roles, the prophet, the priest, and the king. They all three held those things and were good at their jobs. But God found problems because they didn't train their children in his ways. Ironically, next slide. Ironically, Solomon himself wrote about the very thing that he needed. The verse that we just did in Soaps, that direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. He wrote about this. And Solomon echoed an earlier verse in Deuteronomy. He said, and you must commit wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. The Lord spoke to the people in Deuteronomy through Moses. And Moses was telling him that the Lord said, you need to take your children and teach them. He says, repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road and when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Reinforcing it, oiling that shield, dousing the shield, making them ready for battle. Because when kids kind of go off, go wrong, it hurts you as well, does it not? You want your best for your children. You don't want them to have to struggle in some of the same ways that you struggled. You want them to be well equipped. And Moses shared with the people that if you want your children to be blessed, teach them these laws. Put this in their hearts. Help them to see me. Help them to develop a relationship with me. He didn't tell, he told them that they should be excellent in things, but he also said, this is important. It needs to be taught at a young age. Did you know that when the reason why we have, and I always wondered this because I think I would appreciate a lot of my education much more now than what I had when I was younger. But the reason we do that is because all those things are being built. Your brain is being built when you're growing up, and your capacity to learn is so much greater than it is when you get to when you get to after 20. Guess what? God knew that. That's why he said for the children to be trained. That's why this is important, what we do back here. when we do children's church, I'm not really great at teaching children. It's hard for me to dumb things down and make it not dumb, but make it at a level that people of a certain age can understand. I struggle with that. I don't think in that direction. Thankfully, there are people that do. I've got this good friend at work, and we talk about this. She trains 3 to 5 year olds at her church at 10 Mile, and she tells me some of the ways that she gets the lessons across. And I'm sitting there like, wow, I would have never thought of that. It's important. God believes that children are the future, and that they should be trained in such a way. And I think you've all heard of those parents that says, well, I'll just let them decide when they get older. I don't want to force anything. They'll give you that whole excuse. And I said, that's because you don't know him and know how critical that your relationship with God can be. Because if it was critical to you, it would be critical for you to give your children that. But because you don't see value in it, you choose not to give them that. And that may be true. If this was religion, it might be true that you should let them make a decision when they get older. Unfortunately, I have a relationship, and relationships become critical. When you lose somebody, when you lose a family member, it hurts. And it hurts deep inside, and it hurts in ways you never imagined. That's because there's a relationship there. When you listen to David in the Psalms wail about how he felt disconnected from God, that was because there was a relationship there. Unfortunately, I think Solomon had an intellectual exercise with God. Train your children up well. You have the most important job in the world. I know that other job puts money on the table or puts food on the table, but it is really important to be able to train children well. Next slide. We're going to wrap up with this. Paul speaks to the Galatians. And I think we're wrapping up with that. I'm sorry. Oh no, I got a couple more slides. I'm sorry. I'm still working through some things. Paul speaks to the Galatians. He says, pay careful attention to your own work, for then you'll get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else, for we are each responsible for our own conduct. We're each responsible for our own conduct. The whole purpose of this message is, as great as my dad was, as great as any dad is, as great as any mom is, your children are going to have to answer for themselves. Just like Eli's sons, just like Samuel's sons, and just like Solomon. They were going to have to answer for themselves. We're each responsible for our own conduct, spelled out in black and white. What an important verse. But what a scary one when you're a parent. That there's nothing that you can do. There's nothing that you can, in that day when they're up there, there's nothing that you can do. They're on their own. So if you've not given them the tools that they need, there's nothing you can say at that point. Next verse, or next slide. That's the good news and the bad news. The good news is, for those of us that had horrible parents, not me, I'm not including myself in that, I had great parents. For those of us that had horrible parents, you're not responsible for what your parents did. That's a great news. If your parents never took you to church, if your parents were mean to you, if there were certain things that went on that shouldn't have went on, you're not responsible for them. You're not going to have to answer for them. That's great news. God sees me for me. The bad news is that same, almost that same thought, that if you had great parents that did great for you and you wound up not being very great in the eyes of the Lord, that's not going to get you in. If I turned out a heathen, if I went down my own road and everything else, after I had good parents, God would be like, who are you? I don't know you. So it's good and bad news. I'm not responsible for what my dad did. I'm not responsible for those things that went on before. But I'm also not going to get any help. We're all our own people. God judges us and us. God looks at our relationship with us. I'm going to have the worship team come on up, and then we'll conclude afterwards.